Before we get started, a quick heads up. Presidents Unplugged now has merch. If you want to support the show and represent the podcast in your daily life, you can at presidentsunpluggedmerch.com. That is presidentsunpluggedmerch.com. Now, let's get into today's episode. "250 years. Compared to the great civilizations of history, that's not very long. Empires have risen and fallen over thousands of years. Kingdoms have come and gone. But in just 2.5 centuries, the United States of America has become one of the most influential nations in human history. Our story has never been perfect. It's been marked by triumphs and tragedies, unity and division, progress and setbacks. We've survived a revolution, a civil war, world wars, social changes, and technological evolutions that would have seemed unimaginable to earlier generations. Through it all, one idea has stayed strong: the belief that free people can govern themselves. On today's episode, we're not telling the story of one president or one generation. We're telling the story of an idea. An idea born in 1776 that continues to shape the world today. This is the 250-year anniversary special of Presidents Unplugged, with liberty and justice for all. Let's do this. To understand the significance of America's 250-year-old birthday, we must first travel back to a time before there was a Constitution, before there was a president, and before there was even a United States of America. Along the eastern coast of North America were 13 British colonies that were beginning to see themselves as something more. As tensions with Great Britain grew, fighting erupted across the colonies, and the Constitutional Convention appointed George Washington to command the Continental Army. Just as this was happening, the political disputes became a struggle for independence. And on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence announced to the world that the colonies were no longer subjects of a king. They were Americans. The Declaration proclaimed that all men are created equal and possess unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those words would become some of the most influential ever written. But those words alone could not secure freedom. The revolution was still uncertain. American soldiers endured tremendous hardship, and defeat seemed way more likely than victory. Years into this war at Yorktown, American and French forces achieved the victory that secured independence. Against all odds, a small group of 13 colonies had defeated the most powerful empire in the world. But winning independence was only the beginning. This new nation struggled under their first type of government called the Articles of Confederation, which prompted people to get together in Philadelphia in 1787 and write something called the Constitution. The Constitution that emerged from the Second Constitutional Convention in 1787 created a government built on checks and balances, making sure that nobody has too much power. Soon afterwards, the Bill of Rights guaranteed fundamental freedoms that are foundational to American life today. All of these struggles came very early in the American experiment. It was an experiment because nobody really knew if creating an independent nation was really going to work. But as George Washington prepared to leave office after serving as the wonderful first president of the United States, he reminded Americans that the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty is finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. Also known as, we're not relying on a king to tell us what to do. It's our job as the American people to govern ourselves and continue the fight for freedom. The country continued, and by 1826, 50 years after independence, the nation had reached its first major milestone, its 50th birthday. The Constitution had survived, elections had been held, power had changed hands peacefully. America had survived its first half-century. That same year, on the 50th anniversary of independence, two of the nation's most important founders, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, died within hours of each other. Unbelievable coincidence, but a strange and gruesome way to celebrate the nation's 50th birthday. But here's what's unique. These founding fathers passing away almost give us a perspective. As one generation, the founders, passed away, left the scene, another group stepped forward. The first 50 years had answered the crucial question that everybody was wondering in 1776. Could America survive? The answer was yes. But the next 50 years would ask a different question. Could America stay together? From 1826 to 1876, the 50th to 100th year of American history, the nation expanded. They went westward and we grew rapidly, experiencing something called manifest destiny, from sea to shining sea. New states joined the Union, settlements were stretching across the entire continent, and millions had the belief that America's future was far beyond the frontier. But then a question began to rise. Would slavery continue to expand as the nation does? As new territories entered the Union, would they become slave states? Slavery grew tensions between the North and the South. Political compromise became increasingly difficult when everybody cared about slavery. Whether we were talking about court decisions, disagreement, and violence all over the nation deepened divisions until the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 triggered a crisis that many had feared for decades. Years before the Civil War was even a thought, Abraham Lincoln warned that a house divided against itself cannot stand. As tensions continue to grow, the nation moved closer to the breaking point. Southern states seceded. Civil war became a reality. Americans found themselves fighting their own fellow Americans in the deadliest conflict in the nation's history. But during this bloodshed came defining moments. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, transforming the conflict into a fight, not only for the Union, but for the freedom of man. When the war ended in 1865, the Union had been preserved and slavery had been abolished. The years of Reconstruction that followed some progress, and some challenges. But by the nation's centennial in 1876, 100 years in, one thing was clear. America had survived the great internal test of self-destruction. The second 50 years had answered another question. Could America stay together? Yet again, the answer was yes. But the third 50 years, from 1876 to 1926, asked what America could become. The answer was extraordinary. Cities continued to expand, railroads connected different regions around the country, new industries transformed the economy. Millions of immigrants arrived seeking opportunity and helped build the nation alongside those already here. Inventors such as Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell changed daily life through electricity and even communication. Theodore Roosevelt, one of the most defining presidents of this time, said this: "Far and away, the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard at work worth doing." This spirit, this drive in the Americans helped define an era of inventors, builders, entrepreneurs, and immigrants who transformed the nation. In New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty, with its torch raised high, welcomed newcomers arriving through Ellis Island. They had come from different nations with different backgrounds, but many shared the belief that America offered possibilities unavailable anywhere else. This time period created what we now know today as the Great American Melting Pot. As all of these individuals were flooding into the United States, innovation continued to reshape the country. In 1903, Orville and Wilbur Wright achieved powered flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. For thousands of years, humanity had dreamed of flight, and now, because of American people, that dream had become reality. America's influence was also expanding far beyond its borders around this time in American history. The Spanish-American War marked a turning point, signaling that the United States was turning into a world power. Theodore Roosevelt wanted a larger American role on the world stage, but this created debates that immediately became part of the national conversation. Should we stay in America, or should we deal with the rest of the world? Well, this is a great time to talk about World War I. Although the United States entered this conflict late, in 1917, American forces joined the war to help tip the balance in the favor of the Allies. This war demonstrated that events occurring thousands of miles away could affect American interests. The nation was becoming increasingly connected to the wider world. And by 1926, America celebrated 150 years of independence. 150 years ago, it had been a fragile experiment attempting the idea of self-government. And now, it was an industrial giant. It was a growing world power and a nation connected by railroads, telephones, electricity, and flight. The third 50 years of American history had answered another question. What could America become? The answer was far more than our founding fathers could have ever imagined. Abraham Lincoln was 6'4". Franklin Roosevelt was the president for over 4,000 days. These are facts. But you know what else is a fact? The fact that Presidents Unplugged has an Instagram page. If you want presidential content and overall updates on the show, come to the Instagram at presidents_unplugged. That is presidents_unplugged. I'll see you there. The fourth 50 years, from 1926 to 1976, would test America on an even larger scale, a global scale. Just 3 years after the 150th anniversary, or if you want the term, the sesquicentennial, the stock market crash of 1929 triggered the Great Depression. Banks collapsed, businesses failed, and millions of Americans lost their jobs. 1 in 4 to be exact. Confidence in our country had vanished overnight. But in 1933, Franklin Roosevelt, the brand new 32nd President of the United States, addressed a frightened nation and reminded Americans that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. His leadership helped restore confidence during one of the most difficult periods in American history. This stance on fear would be even more important as we thought about an even greater challenge that loomed overseas. After the attacks on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the United States entered World War II. Americans fought across Europe and the Pacific while families supported the war effort at home. The victory of this world war came at an extreme cost, but it helped secure freedom against some of history's most dangerous threats. And when the war ended, the United States emerged as a global leader. But we weren't done yet. The Cold War immediately followed, bringing decades of competition with the Soviet Union and the constant threat of nuclear war. Americans confronted new fears as their nation began to play this central role in world affairs. And at the same time, at home, the civil rights movement pushed America closer to the promises of all men being created equal. And in 1969, only 66 years after the Wright brothers' first flight, Americans walked on the moon. But even though we seem extremely successful and undefeated, challenges still persisted. The Vietnam War divided the country. Watergate damaged public trust in the government. And by the mid-1970s, many Americans wondered what came next. But then came the bicentennial. 200 years. In 1976, Americans celebrated 200 years of independence. Fireworks exploded in the skies after 2 centuries of triumphs and trials. The Constitution remained strong, and this American experiment continued. The fourth 50 years of our country had answered another question. Could America meet challenges on a global scale? Once again, the answer was yes. And now we get into the final section. The fifth 50 years from 1976 to 2026. These years were defined by change. During this time, the Cold War came to an end. The internet connected millions around the world. Technology transformed daily life. Smartphones placed the world's information into the palm of your hand. Rapid change was everywhere. But it didn't come without difficulty. On September 11th, 2001, almost 3,000 Americans were killed in horrendous terrorist attacks. These attacks shocked the nation. But at the same time, they also revealed America's resilience. In a time that could be defeat, in a time where most would sit down and fear, citizens came together in grief, determination, and unity. While speaking to the nation right after the attacks, George W. Bush reminded Americans that terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shattered steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. The years that followed brought new challenges, including the War on Terror, the Great Recession, political division like we'd never seen before, and the COVID-19 pandemic. But at the same time, innovation continued to accelerate. Social media completely reshaped communication. Artificial intelligence in recent years began transforming industries. The future was arriving faster and faster than ever before. But despite all of this change, some things in our country remained suspiciously familiar. Americans still debated. Americans still voted. Americans still dreamed. Americans still believed that tomorrow could be better than today. And so, by 2026, the United States reached another milestone. 250 years of independence. As we look across those 2.5 centuries, one thing becomes clear. The American story was never built by presidents alone. And that's coming from the Presidents Unplugged podcast, so you're going to have to trust me. We weren't built by only presidents. We were built by the soldiers who endured the hard times during war, by immigrants who crossed the ocean seeking American opportunity, by farmers, factory workers, teachers, scientists, entrepreneurs, parents, and citizens, and those who fought for our country and never came back. Those who contributed to their communities, and more importantly, their country. The story of America has always been the story of its people. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. The America of George Washington would have been almost unrecognizable to Abraham Lincoln. The America of Abraham Lincoln would have seemed unimaginable to Franklin Roosevelt. And the America of Franklin Roosevelt would be nearly impossible for our founders to even comprehend. Yet through every generation, something remarkable has endured. A belief. The belief that free people can govern themselves. The belief that liberty is worth preserving. The belief that tomorrow can be better than today because of hope. The belief that each generation has a responsibility to leave the nation stronger than it found it. The first 50 years proved that America could be created in the first place. The second 50 years proved that America could stay together. The third 50 years proved America could continue to grow. The fourth 50 years proved that America could lead through global challenges. The fifth 50 years proved America could adapt. But the next 50 years still remain unwritten. Today, as we celebrate America's 250th anniversary, we're doing more than just remembering the past. We're accepting a responsibility. The first 250 years belong to history. The next 250 years belong to us. What we build, what we preserve, what we improve, what we leave behind, that chapter has not yet been written. That responsibility is best said by John F. Kennedy when he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." As Americans celebrate 250 years, a quarter of a millennia of independence, that call to action remains just as relevant today. And that is why this anniversary matters at all, because the story continues with liberty and justice for all. And that is why the 250th anniversary of the United States of America is so important. Tune in next Friday as we talk about Benjamin Harrison, somebody only remembered for being in between Grover Cleveland's two terms. But in many ways, Harrison is so much more. From being a conservationist before it was cool to a monopoly destroyer, Harrison is so much more than just the guy in between. Learn about that and much more next week on Presidents Unplugged. I'm Ty Svensson, and I'll see you soon. God bless. Thank you for listening to Presidents Unplugged. If you enjoy content like this, give us a follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify today to be notified that your favorite presidential podcast has released new content. Now, when do we release new content? Once a month, maybe twice a year, maybe even once a year? No. We release new content every Friday at 1 p.m. for my American enthusiasts to enjoy. Come join me on our dive into making American history the most entertaining and interesting subject to learn every single week. I'm Ty Svensson, this is Presidents Unplugged, and I'll see you soon.